So humid here, so. All right, hi. Okay, so I'm not in charge, but I'm in the top left corner, so I feel pressure to go first. But welcome to the Space Sirens Club. It's for the book The Unbroken, which, yeah, I'm very excited about this. And if you're new here, I guess we'll just all go around and say who we are and where you can find us if you want more thoughts. But I'm Angela. My channel is Literature Science Alliance. Go, Judith.
Hi, I'm Judith. My channel is Dead Good Book Reviews. Go, Kerry.
I'm Kerry. My channel is Kerry Louise Reed. And go, Stephanie.
My name is Stephanie, and my channel is Miss Richards Reads. And this is Oliver in the background.
I love Oliver. Just don't tell Lucy. Lucy is Stephanie's other cat, who I don't like as much because she always stares at me like she's angry.
She has the angry stepmother face going on. But it's okay. So, what did we think of the book? Or should we do a summary?
What'd you say?
Should we do like a summary type thing first? Or for those that might not have read it yet?
Well, the tagline of the book is every empire demands revolution. I do feel like that summarizes what you get in these pages.
I'd agree with that.
Agree.
Also, this cover is stunning and really, like, I really love this cover, like, a lot.
Have you done the Google Lens thing on it yet?
No, I
makes
haven't
me
wanted to do it yesterday and I forgot.
Yeah, it makes the sand move, and if you look at it on the back, the author talks, and that's how I learned how to say Terrain's name. So, hello, Marlene. And let's see, yeah, we're going to talk spoiler-free for the first, like, bit. And so, yeah.
I did listen to this on audio, and it was quite good.
That's good.
Yeah, I loved all the French influence in the names and the language and stuff. I thought that was really cool and unexpected.
Yeah. So I guess we could each go around and like say what our general thoughts and experience were, spoiler free.
Mhm.
That works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barry, you were going to say something, so you can go first if you want.
I was just going to say that, yeah, when I realised it was post-colonial, or it was to do with colonialism, and then I realised it was about French colonialism, I was very excited because I did French at undergrad and did a couple of modules looking at sort of colonialism and the end of the French Empire, and we learned a little bit about the Algerian War of Independence. I mean, this was over 10 years ago, so I'm a little bit rusty. I did try and brush up a little bit of knowledge last night, but it was clear that all of that sort of stuff was quite influential in the writing of this book, and I found that really interesting. So, yeah, overall, I mostly liked the book. I found it a bit hard going in places, but I thought the writing was beautiful, and I really liked the two central characters, and I was really rooting for them. I just found I found it hard going because I just never knew what was going to come next. Like, everything in this book was really surprising, and I didn't expect basically any of it. The story just went entirely different places to what I thought was going to happen all the time, and so I found that a little bit tiring, but in a good way.
Also, I agree with you. I think this is definitely a fantasy book with lots of fantasy names, like, or they're inspired, like, it's a whole set of new names and you get them all at once, and it's like kind of hard to wrap your head around. And it being French, I felt like such a baby, like all the people who hate when they're all like Spanish influenced names, but I'm used to Spanish. I'm not used to French. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it took me a minute to get into it, but once I did, I thought it was pretty fast paced. And I was really, really hooked and had to find out what happened. And like Carrie said, I really liked the discussion on like post-colonialism and things like that. And I was really, really rooting for the two main characters as well. So I thought it was.
Before I go, Marlene said, I think that was part of what was a struggle for me, that I had difficulty to see where the plot was going to go until even halfway through.
Mm-hmm. It didn't get any better in that sense.
Well, so I think, so for me, I was really apprehensive about this book because I knew it was low magic and I knew it was military fantasy and presumably about a revolution. I've read lots of those, and a lot of those have been misses for me because I usually read fantasy because I want the fantastical. If I don't want that, I usually go to sci-fi. Like, I usually love military sci-fi, and I don't love military fantasy because usually when I want that thematic content, I go to sci-fi. But I really liked this one because it did all that stuff that like was very different from every other revolution stuff. Like, when we talked about the Bone Shard daughter, one of my complaints was the revolution part of that story. I didn't feel like for it to be there, it was realistic or fleshed out enough or had like the nuance that I've been craving. And this was like everything. Like, if you're going to be like, we have a revolution and we're going to make it messy and look at everything and like really try to like make it so hard for you to understand how and what you want to have happened, because that's what it's like when you have these really messy situations. I just loved it, and I instantly loved Luca and Terrain. And I mean, maybe like the first 2 pages while I'm just trying to figure out who everyone is, because like you just get introduced to all the names like within the first 3 pages. But then like for me, like the first week of Terrain existing in this place is like she went through it. Like, she just goes through it. And so for me, it was incredibly fast paced the whole time. And I love when authors can make my heart drop and make me tense. And that happened several times. But I like that in my reading experience because I think it's hard to surprise me these days. Not that I don't mind if something's predictable, but I find it hard for me to feel like there are stakes and feel like stressed. So I really value that.
I had a wonderful time. I think I did a similar thing to you, Angela, where because I'm on the press list for Orbit, so I get a lot of their stuff through. And the email came around saying, "Do you want to request a copy of this?" And I remember thinking, like, "Oh no, that one's not for me." And fully, probably based on the cover, and I think the military aspect of it, I went like, "I'm okay. I don't. War is not in my. It doesn't fit in my head very well." And then when it came up for this, I'm really glad it did because I really enjoyed it, and I think potentially that was missold, not in a bad way, but the espionage part of it, I was like, oh, okay, yes, this is what I want. I want a plot where not only do you have kind of infiltrate various places, but then also we're going to explore all of the complicated loyalty that comes with that. I was like, yes, I'm here for this. And I think, I can't remember if this was before we went live, but talking about like who you root for, this book managed to keep a fairly level playing field where I wasn't like, I want all of these people to have bad things happen to them and you one person to have good things happen to you. It was really nuanced and I appreciated that. So yes, I had a wonderful time.
What were everyone's ratings on your scale, whatever that means?
I did 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I think in terms of enjoyment, it was around a 3, but I gave it extra points because of the writing style, so I rounded up to 4.
I have been forgetting to star rate things this year because I stopped recording anything digitally. I've just been writing it down in a book. But I think it's probably a 4.5. I think if depending on the mood I read it in, it could be a 5. But it would depend what else was going on because so much of 5 is a gut feeling for me. How about you?
Oh, it was a 5. I read the first 20% on my free library Kindle, and then I purchased the book, which I don't purchase books often for those who don't know me. And then I had while I was reading it, I had some complaints. And then by the end, the author had addressed all of my complaints. And I think it's because it hooked me from the beginning and I loved the roller coaster and it stuck the landing. I think it's because it hit all of those things and the writing's beautiful and I love the characters. It's a debut. How is this a debut? Yeah. It's very similar to how when I read The Sword of Kaigan, I'm like, how is this self-pubbed? It's just, I don't know. I just really liked it. Other spoiler-free thoughts. I guess it's hard to talk about favorite characters, but what did you like about the character work? Or didn't like? Thoughts on character work?
I really like that we had a really strong character that's how do I word it? Luca was disabled, but she was still a really, really strong character, and it didn't really hinder her from doing what she wanted to do. And I really appreciated that. It was just, it wasn't a focus. like back.
I think for me, I liked with pretty much all of the characters, with the possible exception of a couple who were really in the background. I think the book really acknowledges the messiness of people and how you can. It would be really easy to do this book and be like, the people doing colonizing are evil, and we're going to paint them as like evil, mustache-twirling evil people who are very bad all of the time, bad, bad, bad. But actually, it acknowledges that there's a certain amount of generational stuff there, and there's people are coming to things from different mindsets. And similarly, on the other sides, there's good and bad things being done and things being taken in different ways. And I thought that messiness is possibly part of what makes the book more complicated and maybe bogs it down in a couple of moments where you're like, gosh, this would be simple if I could just hate this person. But I think overall, everyone had a lot of nuance to them, which isn't something that you see all the time, because it can be, as I say, it's easier to just say we have evil versus good, here we go. Yeah,
I'd agree with that. I mean, I prefer character-driven books in general, but I have to really like the characters and want to root for them. And we were just saying before, we were comparing a little bit to Jade City, which I didn't like, but the main reason I didn't like that was because I didn't like any of the characters or root for them. Whereas in this book, the characters grabbed me really quickly, and I really cared about them really quickly and wanted to know what was happening to them. And that was both Luca and Terrain. I just really cared about what happened to them and about their motivations and about why they were doing what they were doing, why they were making the choice they were making, and trying to understand that. I also realized when reading A Memory Called Empire that a couple of my favorite tropes are characters being out of their depth, and characters not knowing who they can trust. And I think that was true in this book as well. There was a lot of tension about loyalty, about whether you could trust people and what it takes to earn people's trust, and which people deserve your loyalty. And those themes were I thought really explored well. But also it did feel like, I mean, Terrain, her whole life changes very quickly at the start of this book, and she doesn't know how to adjust. Like, she really struggles to adjust to not being military, and I thought that was really well explored. And Luca trying to kind of win her empire essentially, but how to do that in the best way and take care of people. And it was clear that her motivation was that she cared about people. It was just, did she care about the right people in the right way? So I thought all of that was really well handled.
And that's so interesting as a I'm getting a lot of echoes.
It sounds fine.
Oh, okay. I might just
if it sounds fine to try talking again, Judah.
Hello. I think that's better. Nope. I'll just shush for a minute. I'll come back.
Am I going to be okay? Carrie, can you mute yours real quick?
Yeah.
All right, is this better? Okay,
yes.
So for some reason, for right now, Carrie's microphone echoed a thing, but it might fix, because StreamYard just does that. My thing about the characters is I really did love, because we had such close POVs, really did get to see their internal struggles, and they were both written very sympathetically. But like, what I liked a lot is Terrain. They both could have been caricatures. They both could have been tropes easily. But Terrain, you really get to follow someone kind of like Mahit in A Memory Called Empire, who is, trying to be a part of this larger thing that really won't accept her for who she is because of all of the prejudice and the colonialism, and then comes back to her home and doesn't belong there, and like how she evolves throughout the story, I think could have been rushed, and I don't think it was rushed. I think it made a lot of sense, and it made a lot of sense. All of the decisions she made, love or hate the decisions Terrain made, they all were very in character, and I find that really important. And then Luca, I mean, I have read a lot of fantasy where you have the princess or the prince or the noble who is on the side of the little guy, and they are always like so unrealistic to me. Like, I love Mistborn. Elend is written way too good for what he would actually be. Like, that's fine. It's a story. I don't care too much. But like, Luca is very likable, is very moral, and you see that. But also when you're with Luca, you're like, yeah, but you still are like such a part of the problem, and you're really not letting yourself realize that. And it's just, it's so good because you still like you can be with Luca though and not want to like strangle her. I think that's just important. So yeah. That I loved the character work and the nuance with that, and then how the themes work. And there's a lot of Memory Called Empire theme overlap, and I love a Memory Called Empire. So like,
Really, do you? You haven't mentioned.
as much as I love a Memory Called Empire, it should be a 5-star read, but it's not. I don't understand who I am. I don't know what they're saying yes to, but
Called Empire overlap.
okay.
I just want to point out with Marlene said one of her favorite characters died pretty early on. I really liked that character too, and I was quite sad.
Yeah, I was going to save it for the spoiler section so we could reminisce on that character and what could have been.
It would have been a very different book if she'd survived.
Yeah, I wonder, but would it? I don't know. It's crazy. I love it. Other spoiler-free things people want to mention, like, I don't know, world building or writing style, or other more themes that you liked, or things you didn't like.
I liked the world building. I thought it was pretty easy to catch on to, probably because it was kind of a low magic system. And I thought the writing was really good. I thought it was easy to visualize things, see everything in my head, but I'm a really visual reader.
No, I agree. As someone who's not a visual reader, I think the way the city is described and set up is like really good. You really feel the claustrophobia of the streets and how they're designed. And I don't know. I mean, I definitely didn't really understand all the layers of the city when it's like described, but I thought it was done pretty good.
I think I had the problem I have quite frequently where I'm like, this is a wonderful map at the start of your book and definitely helps me to understand your broader geopolitical situation. But I actually want a map of where this book takes place, which is in one location. I just zoom in, and then give me the bigger map, like for book 2. Give me that then. So I think I'm not very good at visualizing the map of places. So I think that would have been my like qualm. Please give me a more detailed map. But I really like I like any fantasy in a city, and then throw in crocodiles and stuff. I'm like, yes.
I think Marlene also brings up a good point. This is a very I think what's called a queer norm fantasy, where like it's you can be queer. It's not a big deal. Yeah. It's not a plot point.
I love that.
Lana says, the world building was easy to follow. I can't always visualize books, but found this quite easy to play on real.
Terrain's a nice character to imagine as well. Just
yes,
in one's own time.
Like the arms, the description of arms and shoulders. That's like my favorite thing. So like she and like how many vests she gets to wear.
Yeah.
This is also a book that like I haven't mentioned it here, but like I had the same feeling I had when I read a different Orbit release, The Mask of Mirrors, which is also very clothing intensive and also has a dance scene. This is not ballroom politics, but this had a dance scene too, and it made me stressed and happy because I like dance scenes. But the clothing, like the black and gold of the military garb and everything, like when this author chose to help me visualize something, I think they did it really well, especially with how bad I am at that. So
yeah. I think it's a book that I could see it being adapted really easily into a movie because the descriptions were so vivid that it's like it would adapt really well to a screenplay in my view. Like, and I'm not great at visualizing stuff, but I could feel the atmosphere of the book really clearly.
Yeah. Those sandstorms at the beginning, like just I could feel the sand on my skin. I was just like, and I think that is how I visualize. I want like the atmosphere and feel. And I think the author chose to spend a lot of time, not just showing me things and being like, this building's here and this is what it looks like, but how it feels to be in that space, which for me is more important because I am more of like I don't even know what type of reader it is, but like I more visualize with different senses than with my eyes. So.
Yeah. Like,
and the descriptions of food as well. That always wins me over.
Yeah. And I also think that if you've read the Davabad trilogy and like you liked but wanted more from like the city politics and stress between all the sides. I think this is more satisfying in that regard. It's lower magic and it has different characters, so it's not like the same. And yes, they're both desert fantasy, but like in terms of like that would have been my one complaint in the Davabad trilogy, where I'm like, I don't love how we had this whole tension and I didn't like feel convinced how about where it ended up. And here I just feel it felt very intentional, and nothing's ever perfect, but I like that this is definitely the start of something, but it is a complete thought for what it was talking about, which I don't think we've talked about, but I think that's important to know for like a first book in a series. Like, I want the next book because I like this author and I want to see more. But like the book ended and I had a very cathartic, this is the end of a book experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I put on the Discord chat like a couple of chapters from the end. I was like, I don't see how this is going to have any resolution, but it did, and it worked. It didn't feel rushed, and so I agree. Like, I really want to know where the series goes next, because this feels like complete in one sense, but it's clear there's going to be a lot more tension to come and a lot more unrest to come, and I just want to see how that happens, and I want to go to the other city.
Yeah. No, and I think we could definitely talk about that. Well, I guess we're probably about to get into spoilers, but like what we think we might focus on, because I have like thoughts and things that like I hope will happen. But yeah. So should I put up the spoiler banner? Is it time?
Do the thing.
It's happening. I just really want people to know.
For those just tuning in or whatever. No.
It's just very clear we are in spoiler territory. So what was the most stressful scene for you, Carrie? Of all the stress.
Goodness, there were so many. I mean, the beginning where Terrain is kidnapped, and I was like, what? And then the whole trial thing, and I was like, how are these people not at all on her side? How is General Cantic not at all on her side? Like, that was the one bit that I was just like, this doesn't quite feel true, in the sense that if Cantic knew her as well as she was meant to, she would have believed her. But I know there was political stuff going on there as well, and it was the setup for what happened next. But yeah, I just did feel like that whole trial scene was just like, it's so obvious that she is not lying about this, from the fact that she had to be rescued and was found essentially bound. Like,
see, for me, it was definitely, that scene was so frustrating, but it was frustrating in the sense that I actually know that that's actually so like what would happen. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes it frustrating, is like, yeah, of course you're just going to throw this person that's so, expendable to you to the wolves and not believe this very realistic story just for the sake of saving face. And because in your head, this is a lesser being and all of that nonsense. Also, like, Cantic in general, I think, was a character that surprised me the most, because I expected mustache twirling villain scenes from Cantic, and that never happened. Like, they weren't ever someone I was like okay with, and I actually really love at the end that scene where like she's directing the battle, and like I thought visually that was a very cool scene, but like she was never mustache twirling villain. She was very much just like really harsh, cruel general lady. Mm-hmm. Like, I still didn't love her, but like I was expecting her to have killed people, and like not like the governor general that people really liked, but like was gone. Although I guess Bo Sang, is that how we say his name? I guess he was mustache twirling villain. I hated him.
He was awful.
He was very awful. Ugh.
I don't hate him as much as Kyle, but I hate him a lot.
Yeah, I think my heart dropped the most when Terrain got shot at the end. Yeah. And, like, she has to survive because this is going to be a trilogy, but I didn't know how she would survive. So it was just, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time for that.
I wasn't sure if Terrain was going to live for a second, and I was like, was I tricked into thinking she's the main character of this trilogy? I was really concerned.
It could be more than one person.
Yeah.
I thought was really cool.
My moments of dread, there were a lot, but I think the two, and if they both were like Luca and Terrain being on sides of things that were morally very wrong for me. When Luca took the priests, I was very anti-Luca taking the priests. I was like, honey, this is bad. No, this is a war crime. This is not okay. And then when Terrain and the rebels do their war crime of biological warfare, and I'm just like, guys, stop it. So those stressed me out because, like, I think that's the part of the book that Carrie was talking about. It's like, how does this end in a way where I'm not a puddle? Which, like, I still was a little broken when this book ended, but I was just like, where are we going?
You were broken. Nicely done.
And I think I found all of the nice moments stressful because I was like, well, this is the up. That means we're headed for a down. So like anytime they were like getting along and communicating, I was like, oh no, one of you's gonna do something and then the other one's gonna find out about it.
Should this be another one of my shirts, Judith?
Yes.
Yes.
For those who don't know, I have a
that one
book club, and Judith makes me shirts off of stupid sentences I say.
They could be anything. They don't have to be t-shirts. They could be posters, coasters, motivational gifts for your friends and family. Oh, this is my work notebook. I probably shouldn't write, this is a war crime. This is not okay.
I mean, it's not a statement that I would be mad someone hearing me say, like, I'm anti-war crime. It seems reasonable. Did any of you guys have this interesting experience reading it while we've had this Palestine stuff happening in the world? Like, I really couldn't, like, actually separate the work from, like, knowing about the Palestine occupation right now and its current, like, escalation and things like that. And I do know that although this is, I think, more based, like what Harry was talking about, on French occupation of different parts of North Africa, that the author themselves, like, has been learning and probably incorporated parts of that other occupation. Because I feel like an occupied place always has to go through similar beats when you have people who have been there for centuries, people who have been there for a few generations who are essentially native to the land but are from another country, and then you have the, like, actual occupiers. Like, there's so many parts. You have the diaspora, which is Terrain, and all of those moving bits I thought were handled really well, and I was so impressed.
Yeah, and I was also thinking about, like, it's a very common thing in a lot of parts of Africa that are still have conflict for children to be taken and made into soldiers, and to actually see that experience and how that creates an internal conflict for that character. I thought that was really well handled and really sensitively done, because it is something that is still happening a lot in the world, and I think a lot of people don't realize that it still happens in the world. So that was really impactful. And I think, again, Israel and Palestine, that is something that happens there too. So it was really, really apt timing for this book to come out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's interesting as well. Oh,
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, in terms of found family being such a trope just generally in fiction at the moment and of all time, because who doesn't love found family? But this was really one of those things where I was like, where is this family going to be found? Because there were so many different options for where, and I think that's also part of where's this book going to go coming in, because you're like, okay, you're going to have a romance here, are you going to reconnect with these people here, are you going to go with your, like, military, all of the above, none of the above, just all of that was really interesting for pulling apart tropes and doing the unexpected or doing the expected, but you don't expect that it's going to happen that way.
Like even when Pruitt sends a messenger to tell Terrain things are happening, and Terrain is very invested with the rebels at that point in the story, knows the kids, and they're like, my family's in trouble, I need to go see what's happening at the gallows. And like, I mean, it seems very clear that Terrain's first family are the Sands, because they're the people that they feel most responsible for. But like, I do see that conflict, and man, to have a mother like Terrain does, whew, the Jackal is not the best mother of the year, but a ferocious character. Like, I really do love her, but I wouldn't want to meet my mom having her like kick me in the gut.
But it was a really interesting dynamic as well, because like you could tell that a lot of her pain came from having lost her daughter so young, not knowing what happened to her. And then when she rediscovers her daughter is basically her enemy. It's just like, yeah, I thought that was really well handled as well. And what you said about like Prue sending the message, you like, the Sands are in trouble, essentially. To have that message come from Prue at that point when they were basically not talking to each other, and there was all this conflict between them, and that was a really powerful moment as well. And I think in terms of the found family, a lot of it was about like losing and refinding family, because Terrain had to accept that like her family didn't want her. None of her families wanted her. So that was, and there was a lot, I think, of deconstruction of identity for Terrain throughout this book, of like rediscovering who she was, who she could be, and who her family could be, and what that all meant for her. And I thought that was really, again, really well done.
No, I think you're so right about the family, even down to chapter titles, which I always forget. But I think we have 4 chapter titles that are specifically about families, and they're reprises. So there's like a family, broken, and then there's the family, broken reprise later. And I know at the beginning, the first family chapter is with the Sands and Terrain, I think really early on. Like that's called family, I guess is what I'm saying. Like it's very blatantly like, this is what I want you to look at. Not that I'm good at reading chapter titles and listening to authors when they tell me what they want me to take from a situation. But, you know, yeah, like chapter 6, it's called A Family, and that's when Terrain's with the Sands. One of the last quiet moments with the Sands, and things like that. So I think you are right on point. That's just what I wanted to say. What did you guys think of the ending?
What did we what?
Think of the ending. And where do we go from here?
I enjoyed it, but I'm horrible at
I missed all of that. Your phone cut out. I don't know why.
I said I enjoyed it, but I'm horrible at predicting things, so I have no idea where it's gonna go. But I'm okay with that.
I want to watch Luca fight for her throne so bad. I'm super pumped for that. I feel like that has to be a part of it. And then kind of like what Terrain was alluding to at the end, it's like, well, just because we kicked out the occupiers, ourselves here are not very good at governing and have our own corruption, and things are going to be real messy as we try to get back to self-governing and things like that. Yeah, so I'm excited to watch that messiness as hopefully magic happens, because I feel like there's more magic.
Yeah. I agree. Like, I'm really interested to see like the rebuilding of the country after the colonized leave, because to a certain extent there's an idea that colonizers are all bad, and then when they leave everything will be fine, which doesn't necessarily play out in history, but then that's part of the history that doesn't often get told. And that's not, I'm not saying in that colonialism is in any way good, and people should be allowed to govern themselves, but it'd be interesting to hear that story told of, we need to figure out how to rule things for ourselves and not rely on other people telling us what to do.
Yeah.
And I think I trust this author and this series to do that well, in a way where some of the things I'd be like, stay away from, let that story lie for a bit. We'll leave that for now.
Yeah, like, I think I'm actually really glad, like, back to Sanderson, that Well of Ascension is primarily about an apocalypse coming, and yes, there's some change of power and transition of power in that story, but we don't focus on it, because every time Sanderson does answer that question, it's a very Western approach, which isn't bad, but it's like, I don't know, he's thematically repetitive in how he solves issues, and it's almost always authoritarian, and I'm just usually glad it's like an apocalypse to distract us from that situation.
My expectation is there will be a reasonably significant time jump, not like years, but potentially maybe a year, and then some like, I am still thinking about you from the past, and then all of that stuff. That's what I think. I don't think it can pick up immediately.
Yeah.
But and
even
also
the
probably
epilogue feels like it's a few months in the future already. So so this magic, though, I want to unpack this magic for a second, because we literally only know like 5 things. Not even, but we know that there are gods, and that if you pray to those gods, you can use those powers. And there seems to be like 2 sides to each power, based on if you power it with human flesh or animal flesh. And we've got the many-legged people, and we have the Targine. Is that how we say it? Who are they supposed to be in history? Are they the English or the Germans? Like, I don't know who they're meant to be. Who, like,
maybe the Dutch with that name?
What?
I said maybe the Dutch with that kind of name.
Maybe. Which also I feel like we haven't talked about Terrain's anxiety attacks and how in Paige, every time she's anxious, she doesn't always say time to catalog, but she says that once. But every time she's stressed, all of a sudden you're getting way more details about a room.
Yeah, that was so good. I was just like, this is exactly what a panic attack feels like, and this is exactly what you need to do when you have one.
Like, I traditionally hate when authors randomly tell me what's in a room, but because it made complete sense, I'm like, oh, Terrain's being, like, triggered into this, and suddenly now, because we're in Terrain's perspective, we see this room, like, random things everywhere, and I'm just... But because of that moment with those people who, I guess, turned into bears while, like, consuming the life force of her fellow, like, Sans, like... And I guess I'm trying to figure out what is Terrain now with her golden eyes. Like, it's similar to the Brigani, but I don't really know much about them other than they hold the cursed island that we haven't gone to.
Yeah. Well, we've surely got to go there in book 2.
I know we have to. Like, they're dropping all these hints about this amazing library and then not showing it to us. Like, I want the library. Give me the library.
Do you think Luca's going to end up with what's his face? The nice kid from the Song family who, like, does research.
Oh, Bastian.
Yeah. Like, they were having comfort, like, with each other. Like, it could just be platonic, but there was, like, I mean, almost, I think all the characters are bisexual to some degree, so, like, I don't really know, like, even she, like, thinks about it, although she obviously has the most, like, passionate chemistry with Terrain. But that doesn't always make it the right choice, and also they're going to be far apart, so, presumably, I guess. I don't really know.
Yeah.
I kind of liked that, like, the romance wasn't a big deal. Like, it was there, but it wasn't, like, it was just a complicating factor. It wasn't really essential to the plot. And I mean, I can take or leave romance, so I don't really care.
Well, I think it was essential for the character work in terms of, I think that was part of how we kept keeping our empathy with both sides.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, neither side chose the romance over their cause or their goals per se, but it added enough complexity and, like, it made you feel okay to be like, okay, I am allowed to like Luca because Terrain also has these complex feelings. Like, I can also do this, you know, despite the atrocities that are occurring at this moment or whatever. Which, like, I really like when Luca finally has to realize, oh, really the thing that I put number 1 on my list is becoming queen, and I guess I need to reckon with the fact that that's not necessarily going to line up with my moral situation. Like, there comes a point where both can't be true. You know, you can't be into the humanities of the situation and want to be queen, because at its core, it's your empire invading and taking over this land that has caused this problem. So I really like that. I don't really know why Gil was the voice of reason. I don't know enough about him to understand, but I liked that he was there to yell at her.
Yes. Yeah.
I think I liked that Terrain is hot, and that was just a thing that was happening. It was like, let's just accept that we are both attracted to each other, and yes, there's a lot else going on, but we're going to also acknowledge this attraction, and we'll see where it goes, and we're not going to get too bogged down, because, yes, but also, you know, we're both attractive young people. Let's do that. I think I appreciate that as a dynamic. It didn't need to be, now we shall save each other from death and I will leap through the fire for you just because you're hot. But there are other reasons.
Their first kiss was my favorite first kiss in a long time. When she's like, do you really want to do this? And she doesn't say anything because that's like the worst kiss I've ever had.
Yeah, I did like that aspect of it. It was like, well, no, I don't want you to just pretend that you want me. I want you to actually want this. And I thought that was really refreshing. And I think that was why, like I say, I can take or leave a romance in this book. Like, if they do figure things out and realize that they are right for each other, then absolutely fantastic. But also if they don't and they end up with other people, that won't bother me either, because it will be real.
Yeah, It definitely, I think sometimes in romance it feels very Hollywood and not realistic. And I appreciate that this was very real. And like you said, I'd be okay if they didn't end up together. It would be nice, but it might not necessarily be realistic if something happened in book 2.
I also like at the end, it's kind of like a thing that's mentioned where her and Prue like try to try things again and it doesn't work. And like, I don't know. I love how this book embraces the messiness. And I feel like I can trust this author with all the messy things. And like, based off whatever logic or rules the author sets up, it will satisfy me, which is what I care about, I guess, at its core.
What'll be very interesting is if we go back to, it begins with a B, but the name will not come to me, back to the place, and Terrain is also there. I was just thinking about power dynamics and home ground, and actually I was like, so in that case it would be flipped around because Luca would be the fish out, and I was like, no, hang on a minute, Terrain is just as much a fish out of water at the start of this book. They are both in a place they do not necessarily recognize. So that'll be really interesting, actually. Again, like tropes that you would expect being slightly different. It's all very, very good.
It's just so good. And I don't know when we're getting another book, but I'm very, very excited. Also, I really like the colors. Like, I like the red burgundy into it. But I do agree with Judith. When I first saw the cover, like, I didn't really say this is my next fantasy book that I want to read. But I do think Terrain's really hot. And I enjoy that Terrain's arms are on full display on the cover. And I like that. I'm not even like actively bisexual. Like, I don't think I've ever dated a woman, but
that's fine. That's valid.
I didn't hear a word, but I think I understood. I think it's your phone's microphone. I think it's a butt. I don't think it wants you to talk about this amazing book.
That's so rude.
Super rude.
I will not use this phone.
What was I gonna say? I feel like I had more thoughts. I definitely have more thoughts, but I'm not good at thinking about things.
I will say I'm normally not a military fantasy person. I think it's the espionage aspect of it that really kept me.
Well, having just finished She Who Became the Sun, which is very, very military, I don't think this read what I would personally define as a military fantasy at all to me, because it's not, here is an endless campaign and you need to remember who is in charge of which city and what needs to happen. I really did like She Who Became the Sun, but that's what I would say is the military fantasy that I would typically avoid. Whereas I think this just happens to feature a character who is a soldier and a lot of other characters who are in the army. But it's a different situation from a war in so many different ways. That I think that's, again, possibly the marketing of it hasn't captured that in the same way, or it's just my brain goes, oh, a red cover military fantasy.
I mean, I do think it's a military fantasy. I think if you told someone this didn't have, because it's about conquest and conquering and a revolution with lots of battles. Like, there's a pretty long battle scene at the end. But you're right, it's not like a campaign military fantasy. Yeah. I think that's just where we get into military fantasy has lots of subgenres, like every subgenre, and there are subgenres that are more fun than others. And I think this one is more balanced and has pretty good pacing. It's pretty good at the time skips, like how much time we spend places. I thought it was interesting for well, it makes sense because the third part's called Rebels, but for a large part of the third part, we're not with Luca. I remember it was like a long time before I was with Luca again. And it's like, I'm really curious about what she's thinking and doing with all this. And yeah, I don't know. I also, a scene that I really liked, and I think I already told Judith about it, and I was surprised at how well the scene landed, because I think it was one of those scenes that no one ever, bold enough to like try and write, because it could go really poorly. And that's when Terrain is yelling at Luca about being too foolish, and one of her soldiers now loses their legs. And fights against the fact that Luca's like, well, I know what it's like to lose a leg, and she's like, but you don't know what it's like to be a soldier to lose your legs. And like, I don't know, like I just feel like I've never seen that pushback, because normally people are very cagey about pushing those envelopes, because you can have a disability but also be insensitive to other people's things. Like, you know, like everyone, just because you can relate to something doesn't mean you can relate exactly how someone else will relate. And I do think that was one of those moments where Luca was blinded by wanting this power, wanting this knowledge. So let's go to the city that everyone's told me not to go to. And then, was it crocodiles? I don't remember what magical creature caused the badness, but I just remember really liking that scene, because I think that scene could have been really bad. And I mean, if you guys disagree and think that scene was bad, feel free, but I thought it was pretty good.
I agree.
Yeah, and it was kind of the thing of like, you have your pain, but your pain is not the same as someone else's pain, and your experience of something is not going to be the same as someone else's. And to really emphasize how someone's identity can be so tied into their body. And yeah, I thought it was really, I agree, I thought it was really well handled.
So, also, I don't know how many people here have read the First Law trilogy, and this is like nothing like the First Law trilogy, but I thought the depiction of the disability reminded me a lot of Glaucta in the First Law, which is like one of the things that I did like, and how it's ever present, but it's not the focus. There's not a lot of real woe is me. I mean, it's discomfort and it's a part of your life, so we can't erase it, but it's I don't know, it's not all you are. It's a definition, but it's not the only thing, kind of like what you were saying, Carrie. I don't know. It reminded me of a part of a book that I thought was well done, but like, this is nothing like the First Law trilogy.
No, not one I would bring in as a comparison necessarily.
Well, this has a plot, so.
Oh, shots fired from Angela.
I don't think that's a hot take. Who reads the First Law trilogy and is like, the reason I like this is the plot? Like, no one.
I can't talk. I read the First Law trilogy, and the whole time I thought one of the characters was actually two characters, because some people called him by his first name and some people called him by his last name. I was like, why are these people doing exactly the same thing and going to the same place?
Was it Giselle? What happened to you?
I think I was just very tired those few weeks. It was I can't remember the captain person, but some people called him by his
Captain
last
West? Name. West is worst. I hate West. Anyways, this is not about the First Law, but I don't like West.
What would people use as a comparison if they were going to say, oh, if you really liked X, or what kind of things did it remind you of? I know we've picked up on a few.
It's hard, because the things I love about it, I think I love because I've never had a book do it so well.
Yeah.
But things that are adjacent that I wouldn't say are as well done. City of Stairs has a lot of those similar geopolitical things, although that one's a little different because it's flipped on its head, where you had an occupying nation that becomes occupied by the nation it used to occupy, and there are still gods, magics. It's by Robert Jackson Bennett, Judith, who you've just discovered as an author you might like. He does a lot of that kind of colonialism, imperialism theming, but I don't necessarily think it's nuanced, but I read his books for just fun times. So, like, there's other things. And like I already said, City of Brass, like that Davabad trilogy, like, if you wanted more of the city political strife and having that handled, because I think it's handled pretty well in that trilogy. I just think that like it didn't quite like stick the landing for me in the way that I was like, fine, it's the end. You didn't want this to go on for 6 books at the pace you were going, and like we can wrap it up where it was wrapped up. But I don't know. Those are the two that come to mind.
Mine is I bring it up almost all the time, but City of Lies by Sam Hawke has a lot of really good stuff about people's origins and connections to their land and privilege and things like that. And also it's a really good I don't know who is on the up and up in this story kind of thing, which
I need to read that one, especially since I know I do, but there's so many fantasy. You also want me to read the Gutter Prayer. Like, what do you want me to do?
Read them.
Not everyone can read 7 books in 5 days, Judith.
Quit your job and just read fantasy the whole time.
Yeah.
I would say, in terms of themes, and I know it's a different genre, but A Memory Called Empire, I feel is very similar in a lot of like themes. And although it's Again, yeah, different genre, although I personally think it reads more like a fantasy than a sci-fi. The Dune books, I've only read the first couple, but there's a lot of like stuff about like gods and power and political machinations in that series as well. And colonialism, like these people have come in and taken over this planet to get this the spice, to get this drug out of it, and how all that plays out. And then in terms of like
oh, you were talking about Dune. For my audio said June, and I was like, I don't know what these June books are.
British versus American pronunciation of a word. Yeah.
Well, you said spice, and I'm like, oh,
June. Yeah, June. Sorry, that's
no,
my
okay.
English language. Yeah, and then I'd also say there's some comparisons with the Hollow Crown Zoraida Cordova books. Like, I mean, different pacing, and that's very clearly YA, but like some of the ideas of like spying and rebellion and so if you want if you're intimidated by this book and want to build up to it, I'd say like maybe read Incendiary first, and that will give you a bit of a flavour, and then give this one a go. That's my comparisons, I think.
Do you have one, Stephanie?
I would say Daevabad and A Memory Called Empire. Those are the two that kind of came to mind while I suppose.
I have one that's kind of a weird one, but I think I can rationalize it. The Mask of Mirrors. Now, it has similar themes in terms of this is an occupied territory and you have different levels. You have like the indigenous population, you have the nobles. Like you do have that. I think that's going to be explored more in later books. But if you want to know characters that I like and that gave me the same type of like pacing, I think I liked the beginning of this as much as I like the beginning of Mask and Mirrors, and everyone tells me both of them start slow. So if you're like me and think both of those were fast, and they both have like name soup. Like there are a lot of similarities. Like they both like one's more Italian Venetian, that's the Mask of Mirrors, and this is more like French Middle Eastern naming conventions. And I don't know, I think though they both have similar weights of world building and character work, and like I don't know, they're not the same. But I do think that, well, I say this, but like I know Justine loves The Unbroken and didn't like The Mask of Mirrors, but I do think there's overlap there. So
yeah, I would agree with that.
And I'm gonna get rid of the spoiler banner unless you guys have more spoiler thoughts. Okay, now we're closer. Well, Carrie, do you want to talk about our next book club book, because it was your pick and I know you're very excited about it?
I'm probably overexcited and I've probably overhyped it, and now you're all going to hate it and then I will cry. I'm just going to find.
I don't think we will, but it's another desert fantasy, I think.
So yeah, so we're reading. Get it on the shot. The Stolen Kingdom by Bethany Atazadeh. So this is the first book in a 4-book series, and they're all loose fairy tale retellings. And this one is based on Aladdin, and kind of the idea is well, she's a princess, so she's going to take over her father's kingdom at some point soon, Ari. But there's this neighboring king who's trying to manipulate his way into the situation and trying to steal her crown, and she is forced to flee, and then she hooks up with this band of bandits, I guess, and then they're involved in doing a heist, and it's really fun. And then there's genies, and the rest of the series kind of builds on this one. But I really love these books. It's quite feminist, so part of the idea is that like any of the people can have power which has come from the Jinni, but only men are allowed to use it. The women are told they're not allowed to use their power, and if women are discovered to have power, then there's like this procedure that separates them from their power. So it's kind of in that sense a reverse of Wheel of Time, I guess. And so a lot of it is exploring why this has happened, and Ari, the queen, has a power, and she's learning how to use it and how to hide it. And yeah, I love these books. And the 4th one's just come out and I haven't read it yet. So I'm going to use this as a chance to reread the first 3 so I can read the 4th one.
Is the 4th one the end, or is it continuing? Or
yeah, the 4th one's the end. So the second one is the Jinni Key, which is a Little Mermaid retelling, which kind of overlaps the end of this book. And then the third one is called The Cursed Hunter, which is
Sounds like Snow White, but I don't know.
no, it is actually Beauty and the Beast, and it's more of a companion novel, but does make more sense if you read it after you've read the first two. And then the final one is, I think it's called The Enchanted Crown, and it's kind of a Sleeping Beauty retelling, but it also brings together the threads of all the others as well. So,
Also, I don't think she highlighted this, but they are short.
yes, they are short.
I think that's important to bring up.
Yes. The fourth one is the longest one of all of them, and the third one is the shortest one. But yeah, this one is only about 300 pages, and they are quite fast-paced, so they are quick, easy reads. I often use them as palate cleansers if I'm feeling a bit slumpy, or I've just read a really intense book, then I'll pick up one of these and I'll read it in a couple of days, and it will just be like breath of fresh air. So.
If you're in the States, it's not as pretty as Carrie's cover. It's like a person on the cover.
Yes. So Bethany Atazadeh is an author tuber, and if you want to learn about her journey with the cover art, then she's documented it all on her AuthorTube channel. Basically, the company that did the original designs went out of business halfway through the series, so she had to get a new cover designer in. But they had already done the work for the third and fourth books, just hadn't finished it. So the new cover designer was able to like rework the later covers and be able to use them, but she ended up with two separate cover designs. So.
I mean, that's kind of standard with US versus UK, but I don't know. Yeah. It's also like one of those things where I'm like, oh my gosh, if one more person puts The Blank Kingdom as their title, like N.K. Jemisin does this too. My favorite authors does this. I'm just like, guys, this is so hard to Google. Like, it's so hard. I'm just like, think of something else. So, any other thoughts before we end the broadcast?
No, I don't think we have a date for our next live show yet, do we? We haven't.
Presumably in about a month, around there. I'm not in charge. Carrie's hosting that one, so.
Yes. Oh, that is.
We will keep it posted on Twitter when we find out what it is. We'll keep you guys updated.
Yeah.
And we have a Discord where you can chat with us throughout the month.
Yeah, you can see me rant about the Stars of Legion, which has nothing to do with anything, but you know.
You're just angry.
It could have been so much better. Anyways, it's just, you know. All right, everyone do the awkward wave thing then. Let's go.